Hey everyone, Noir here. Let's get into today's Reddit story.
I always felt like my parents were willing to help my brother get ahead, while telling me I should just keep renting and stay where I was. Instead of waiting for anyone to give me a chance, I took the money I had spent years saving, bought my first investment property, and then kept adding more. So later, when my brother casually asked me about my house, I looked at him and said, "Which one?" Being the forgotten son teaches you something pretty early in life. After a while, people stop noticing you're even there. That was exactly how it felt one evening, while I sat at my parents' dining room table eating leftover meatloaf that tasted about as depressing as the mood in the room. Right then, my mom reached into her purse and handed my younger brother Brandon an envelope. It wasn't his birthday. It wasn't graduation day. It wasn't any special occasion at all. It was just an ordinary Tuesday in April. Brandon opened the envelope and his eyes immediately went wide. Holy crap. Are you serious? Dad smiled from ear to ear like he'd just hit the jackpot. You're ready, son. It's time to invest in your future. Brandon pulled out a check and held it up like Charlie holding the golden ticket from Willy Wonka. $10,000. I quietly kept chewing my meatloaf, although somehow it suddenly tasted even worse. It's for the house, Mom said proudly. Our little homeowner. Brandon was 26. I was 28. Over the previous 2 years, Brandon had been fired from 3 different jobs. His credit score was so terrible that banks probably laughed when they saw his application. Every other week, he still sent our parents Venmo requests because he needed money for gas. But somehow, he was the one everyone believed was ready to own a home. That's awesome, man, I said. And honestly, I did mean it. At least part of me did. Mom finally turned toward me, almost like she had just remembered I was sitting at the table. So, Tyler, how's your apartment? You're still living in the same place? She asked it as if my apartment was just some temporary stop before I eventually became successful. Yeah, I answered. I've actually been thinking about buying something, I added. Maybe a small rental property. I've been putting money aside for one. Dad laughed. Not just a little chuckle. He genuinely laughed, like I had announced I was planning to join the circus. Tyler, come on, he said. That's way over your head. You manage apartment buildings. You don't own them. Why don't you try renting somewhere a little nicer first? Baby steps. Baby steps. Brandon just smirked while staring down at his mashed potatoes. He never said a word. He didn't have to. I smiled and nodded. You know what? You're probably right. Mom reached over and patted my hand. It was supposed to be comforting, but it felt more like someone reassuring a dog after it made a mess on the floor. We only want what's best for you, sweetheart, she said. Sure, there's no reason to take unnecessary risks. That's the thing about becoming the family disappointment. It doesn't happen because of one huge moment. It happens because of hundreds of tiny moments. Little cuts that slowly leave scars spelling out the same message. You're just not good enough. When I was 12 years old, I built an incredibly detailed model city for a school science project. I spent 3 full weeks working on it. Every building had tiny working lights because I wired the electrical system myself. It won first place at the science fair. Dad looked at it and said, "Well, at least you're good with your hands." That was all. About 2 months later, Brandon earned nothing more than an honorable mention at a swim meet. Dad bought him a brand new laptop. Then they took him to Disneyland. I got a quick pat on the back. Mom wasn't always like that, though. When I was little, she'd sit beside me while I drew buildings for hours. We'd drink hot chocolate together, and she'd tell me someday I'd become an architect, someone who built things for a living. But after Brandon started winning awards and getting everyone's attention, I slowly became Tyler's doing fine in his own way, which was really another way of saying, please stop expecting more from us. I drove back to my apartment afterward. 3rd floor, no elevator. I paid $1,150 every month for 520 square feet that people like to describe as cozy. Honestly, if you stood in the middle of the place, you could almost touch every wall without moving much. One neighbor played the drums at 2 o'clock every morning. Another neighbor, a woman named Janice, collected 47 ceramic frogs, and somehow had a different story behind every single one of them. Still, the apartment was mine. Well, at least I paid the rent on time every month. I sat down on my worn-out brown couch that I'd picked up from Facebook Marketplace. It had a few mysterious stains that I tried not to think about. Then I opened my laptop. For the past 6 months, I'd been working on something my family knew absolutely nothing about. I wasn't just watching random YouTube videos. I was seriously studying real estate investing. I had finished an online course, read 7 different books, joined forums where experienced investors discussed capitalization rates and cash-on-cash returns, and even spent $300 attending a weekend seminar. At the same time, I had spent the last 3 years saving every extra dollar I could. No vacations. In fact, my last vacation meant sleeping on the floor of my friend Logan's hotel room because I couldn't afford a room of my own. I didn't buy a newer car. My 2008 Honda Civic had 187,000 miles on it, and the check engine light had become a permanent part of the dashboard. I rarely ate at restaurants, unless there was some unbelievable 2-for-1 deal at a place that probably struggled to pass health inspections. After 3 years of living that way, I had managed to save $22,000. For 2 straight months, I'd been watching one property. It was a bank-owned duplex on the east side of town that had gone through foreclosure. The listing pictures looked like they belonged in a crime scene investigation file. The paint was peeling. The grass had grown out of control. One window was covered with an old campaign sign from 2012, but underneath all of that, the building itself was solid. Both units already had long-term tenants renting month to month. The asking price was $89,000. I'd gone over the numbers so many times that I practically knew them by memory. If I put $20,000 down and financed the rest with a conventional loan at 6.5% interest, my monthly mortgage payment would be around $550. The duplex brought in $1,400 in rent every month. After paying property taxes, insurance, setting aside money for maintenance, and planning for possible vacancies, I estimated I'd still clear around $400 every month. On top of that, I'd finally own a real asset. Something that could increase in value over time, instead of simply sending another rent payment to someone else. One thing mattered just as much as the monthly cash flow. I would finally own a real asset. Something that could grow in value over time. Something with my name on the deed. I had already been pre-approved for the loan. The inspection was already scheduled for Friday. The only thing left to do was submit my offer. But every time I got ready to do it, I heard Dad's voice in my head. "That's way over your head." I stared at the listing. Then I looked over my numbers one more time. After that, I listened to another voice. My own. The one that had survived years of being treated like I would never be enough. Screw it. I opened my email and wrote to my real estate agent, Emily. "Let's do it. Full asking price." I hovered over the send button for a few seconds before finally clicking it. Then I told absolutely nobody in my family. The next 3 weeks felt like the longest weeks of my life. First, the offer had to be accepted. Then came the inspection. After that was the appraisal. And somehow there was even more paperwork than I thought should legally exist. My loan officer, Karen, seemed to call every other day. "We need proof of employment. We need your last 2 pay stubs. We need another bank statement. We need an explanation for this purchase." All right. Maybe that last part is a slight exaggeration. Only a slight one. While all of this was happening, I still showed up for Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The first Sunday after I submitted my offer, Brandon announced his own news. "My closing is in 3 weeks," he said while passing the green beans around the table. Mom's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Our little homeowner." Dad lifted his glass of iced tea. "To Brandon, and to making smart investments." I quietly raised my glass of water. I didn't say a single word. After dinner, I was standing at the sink loading the dishwasher when Mom walked over. "You've been awfully quiet tonight." "I'm just tired." "How's work?" "It's going fine." "You're still managing that apartment complex?" As she dried a plate with one of those live, laugh, love kitchen towels, she looked over at me. "You know, If you ever decided to go back to school, your father and I could probably help pay for part of it. That almost made me laugh. Brandon had just been handed $10,000. I was being offered partial tuition. Maybe someday. I'm okay, Mom. Thanks. She gently squeezed my shoulder. We just worry about you. What she really meant was simple. We've already decided your life isn't going anywhere. At exactly 11:47 that night, my phone buzzed. It was Emily. The appraisal came back at $91,000. You're cleared to close. Congratulations. I sat there staring at the text for at least 5 minutes. I was really going to own property. For a moment, I wanted to call my parents. I wanted to call somebody. I wanted to yell the news from the third-floor window of my tiny apartment. But I didn't. This accomplishment belonged to me. Closing day finally arrived 3 weeks later. It was a Thursday. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment. I put on the nicest button-down shirt I owned, one I'd bought at Target, and drove to the title company. The whole office smelled like stale coffee and old paperwork. Inside, it was just me, Emily, and Susan, the title officer, who looked like she'd been handling closings since before computers existed. Sign here. Initial here. Date here. I signed so many documents that my hand actually started cramping. Finally, Susan slid a folder across the desk. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. You're officially a property owner. I walked out carrying a folder full of paperwork, 2 sets of keys, and a feeling I honestly had never experienced before. Real pride, the kind you earn. I climbed into my Civic and immediately called my best friend, Logan. Hey, what's up? He answered. I did it. You did what? I bought it. I closed today. There was a long pause. Then he practically shouted, Holy crap, that's amazing! You actually did it! Did you tell your parents? No. Why not? Because somehow they'd find a way to make it about how Brandon's house is bigger or better. Yeah, that's probably true. So what's next? I'm going to see my property. I drove there without stopping anywhere else. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat there staring. Honestly, it looked even rougher than the listing photos. Weeds had taken over the yard. Someone had covered the garage with graffiti. One of the gutters looked like it was somehow hanging without obeying the laws of physics. But none of that mattered. It was mine. I walked over and knocked on one of the doors. A woman in her 50s answered with a warm smile. You must be Tyler, she said. The new landlord? For a second, hearing those words felt strange. The new landlord. That was me. I just wanted to introduce myself. Her shoulders relaxed immediately. Oh, thank goodness, she said. The last owner never fixed anything. My bathroom sink has been leaking for 3 months. I'll take care of it this weekend. Her whole face brightened. Really? Really. I spent the next hour walking through both units, making notes about everything that needed attention. The list was long, really long. But standing there, inside a property that belonged to me, talking with tenants who actually needed my help, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Before I left, I took one picture. Just me standing in front of the duplex with my keys in my hand. I almost uploaded it to Facebook. I almost dropped it into the family group chat. Then I remembered Dad laughing at me, Mom patting my hand, Brandon smirking over his mashed potatoes. I deleted the photo. They didn't get to be part of this moment. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That first weekend taught me 3 important lessons about owning rental property. First, fixing a leaking sink always sounds easier than it actually is, especially when you're lying underneath it while water keeps dripping into your face. Second, YouTube repair videos lie. A quick 15-minute repair somehow turns into 3 hours and 2 separate trips to Home Depot. Third, there is something incredibly satisfying about repairing something that actually belongs to you. Most of Saturday was spent inside Unit A. I fixed Angela's leaking sink. I replaced 2 light fixtures that flickered like they were sending Morse code. I also discovered that the previous owner had repaired the garbage disposal by simply unplugging it and pretending nothing was wrong. Around lunchtime, Angela brought me a glass of homemade lemonade. You really didn't have to do all this, she said. I told you I would. The last landlord said the same thing. He never came back. I tightened the final connection under the sink and flipped the switch. The garbage disposal immediately roared back to life. Angela actually clapped. You're a miracle worker, I laughed. No, I'm just a stubborn guy with YouTube. That evening, I drove home exhausted. I was covered in dirt and carrying a Home Depot receipt for $240. But for the first time in years, I felt something my regular job had never given me. I felt useful. The next Sunday dinner was all about Brandon. His closing had officially happened that Friday. I brought a discounted bottle of wine from Trader Joe's and walked into a house that smelled like pot roast, the official scent of an important family celebration. Brandon and Megan were passing around pictures of their new place on a phone. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, 2-car garage. And look at this backyard. Mom could barely hide how excited she was. Show everyone the kitchen. When the phone got to me, I looked through the pictures. It was nice. A typical suburban house. Nice enough, just like 5 or 6 others on the same block. Congratulations, man, I said. It looks great. Thanks, Brandon said. You should come by sometime. Maybe it'll inspire you to buy a place of your own. Someday. Like buying a house was still some impossible dream for me. I smiled. Maybe. Later, I was in the kitchen washing dishes, as usual, when Dad walked in and grabbed a beer. Your brother's really making something of himself, he said. Yeah. That's what happens when you make smart choices. A steady job, a good woman, and thinking ahead. I scrubbed a plate a little harder. You could have that too. Stop fooling around with apartment management and get a real career. I like my job. Do you? Or are you just comfortable staying where you are? I almost told him I already owned an investment property, that I'd done it without anyone's help. But I didn't. Maybe it was pride. Maybe stubbornness. Or maybe I wanted to see how long I could keep it to myself. I'm doing fine, Dad. He shrugged. If you say so. Just don't wait too long to grow up. Standing there with my hands in soapy water, I made up my mind. I was buying another property. Property number 2 came along in October. By then, checking listings had become an obsession. Every morning, every lunch break, every night before bed. Emily probably thought I'd lost my mind. You only closed 4 months ago, she said. Are you sure you're ready again? What about the duplex on Maple Street? I asked. The one with the bad roof? She replied. Tyler, replacing that roof will cost at least $10,000. I know. But the duplex is only $75,000. She looked at me for a moment. You've really done your homework. I don't sleep much. The Maple Street duplex was rough. The roof looked like it had survived every storm imaginable. One unit sat empty because the ceiling leaked so badly it was practically an indoor fountain. The other unit was occupied by Dennis, an older tenant who had lived there for 8 years and paid $650 every month without ever being late. I can make this work, I told Emily. She laughed. You're either brave or crazy. Why not both? I offered $60,000. The seller countered at $82,000. I accepted. This time I borrowed against my first property to cover part of the down payment. It meant more risk and more debt, but the numbers still made sense. I closed in November, 6 months after buying my first place. Logan helped me clean out the vacant unit. We filled an entire dumpster. This is crazy, he said while hauling out trash. You actually own 2 properties now. Technically, the bank owns most of them. Still, that's 2 more than I own. He grinned. And 2 more than Brandon bought by himself. His house is nicer. Maybe, but he didn't earn it the way you did. That one stuck with me. For the next 2 months, I spent every weekend fixing the place. The roof cost $9,800. Ouch. New flooring was another $2,110. Then came paint, new fixtures, and a deep cleaning. By January, both units were rented. Together, they brought in $1,350 a month. Property 1 generated about $305 in cash flow. Property 2 added another $370. That gave me roughly $780 in passive income every month. In 8 months, I'd made more progress than I had in the previous 5 years. The closest I came to giving myself away happened during Sunday dinner in February. Hannah, who usually paid little attention to me, asked if I was still working at the apartment complex. I actually left in December, I said. The rental income wasn't enough to live on, so I started managing properties for a few small investors. Same income, more flexible hours. Kind of property management consulting. Dad looked interested. Consulting? Sounds impressive. It's nothing special. I just help small landlords. Brandon laughed. So you're fixing toilets? Just in more places now? Everyone laughed. I smiled. Something like that. What I didn't tell them was that some of those toilets were in properties I owned. At that point, I owned about $161,000 worth of real estate that generated around $780 a month. Instead, I quietly went back to loading the dishwasher. Mom found me in the kitchen a few minutes later. I worry about you, she said. You've seemed distant. I've just been focused on work. Well, that's good. Focus is important. She hesitated. If you ever need help. I know, Mom. Thanks. She walked away looking disappointed, almost like she expected me to admit I was struggling. The truth was, I wasn't. For the first time in my life, things were actually going my way. I just wasn't telling anyone. Property number 3 came in May. It was a small house near a popular hiking area. The owner was tired of being a landlord. She listed it for $85,000. I offered $88,000. She accepted immediately. Instead of renting it long-term, I turned it into a short-term vacation rental. I spent $6,000 furnishing it with furniture from IKEA and Facebook Marketplace. I took the photos myself using my phone and a $30 Amazon tripod. Then I listed it on Airbnb. It was booked within 3 days. By summer, it was bringing in around $1,100 a month, more than both duplexes combined. Logan came to see it. This is brilliant, he said. Why didn't you do this with the other places? I'm learning as I go, I said. Every property teaches me something. 3 properties in 1 year. Sounds crazy. It is, I admitted. But it's working. After expenses and reserves, I was making about $1,800 in monthly profit. It wasn't enough to quit consulting yet, but for the first time in my life, I finally felt financially secure. For the first time in my life, I finally felt financially secure, and my family had no idea. The closest I came to getting caught happened at Brandon's birthday barbecue in August. I was standing by the grill when Dad's friend Gregory walked over. He worked in commercial real estate and had known our family for years. Hey, Tyler, your dad says you're doing property management. Something like that. Ever thought about commercial real estate? I've got a client looking for someone. I'm focused on residential right now. Gregory nodded. Smart. Residential is hot. Are you investing yourself or just managing properties? I noticed Dad paying closer attention. A little of both, I answered carefully. Good for you, Gregory said. Real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth. I only wish I'd started younger. Just then, Brandon walked over with a beer. What are you guys talking about? Your brother's getting into real estate, Gregory said. Brandon laughed. Tyler? Come on. He manages apartments. Actually, he manages properties, Gregory corrected. There's a difference. Dad suddenly looked uncomfortable. I excused myself and headed inside. Mom caught me in the kitchen. Gregory seemed impressed. He's just being polite. Are you really investing in real estate? I'm looking into it. She smiled. That's wonderful. Maybe your father was wrong about taking baby steps. I left a little early that evening. I told everyone I had an Airbnb guest checking in, which was true, but it also gave me an excuse to leave. On the drive home, I realized something. I'd spent all this time hiding my success because I was afraid they'd dismiss it, afraid they'd make it seem smaller than it was. But keeping the secret was getting harder. Part of me actually wanted them to know. Not because I needed their approval. I just wanted them to realize how wrong they'd been about me. Completely wrong. Property number 4 came in September. It wasn't anything special. Just another duplex that needed work and already had tenants. The numbers made sense, so I bought it. That purchase pushed my portfolio past $300,000. It also became the property that would later end up in the newspaper. By October, I owned 4 properties with 11 rental units. After expenses, my monthly cash flow was around $3,400. I had stopped doing property management consulting and was managing my own portfolio full-time. Whenever someone asked what I did, I'd simply say, "I work in real estate." Usually, that ended the conversation. People either got uncomfortable talking about money or assumed I was exaggerating. My family definitely assumed the second. Thanksgiving was at my parents' house. I almost skipped it. I'd only been to a few Sunday dinners during the previous 6 months, and every visit made me feel more like an outsider. Then Mom called. "Please come. I miss you." So I went. Brandon and Megan were obviously hiding something. You could see it on their faces. Right after appetizers, Brandon stood up. "We've got some news." Megan smiled. "We're having a baby." The room exploded. Mom cried. Dad hugged them. Hannah practically screamed with excitement. I smiled too. "Congratulations." And I meant it. The conversation quickly became all about them, baby names, due dates, nursery ideas. Then Dad said, "When you're ready for a bigger place, we'll help again. Think of it as another family investment." I quietly cut my turkey without saying anything. Hannah looked over at me. "What about you, Tyler? Still doing property management? Or are you actually getting into real estate investing?" Everyone looked at me. "Investing?" Dad asked. "With what money?" There it was. "I've been saving." Brandon laughed, not to be cruel, just because he couldn't imagine it. "Dude, investment properties are expensive. You'd need like $30,000 just for a down payment." "I know." Dad set his fork down. "Tyler, be realistic. Investment properties aren't for beginners. You could lose everything. Go back to school, get a Master of Business Administration, then think about real estate." I took a drink of water and slowly counted to 5. "I appreciate the advice." The conversation moved on, but I caught Dad and Brandon exchanging that familiar look, the one that said they'd straighten me out later. After dinner, while I was loading the dishwasher like always, Brandon came over. "Hey, I wasn't trying to put you down." "I know. It's just, real estate is risky. My mortgage is killing me. Most months I barely break even." That surprised me. "I thought everything was going great." He laughed. "Turns out buying a $100,000 house doesn't magically make you good with money. Property taxes, homeowners association fees, it adds up." I almost told him the truth. I almost told him I owned 4 properties and had already learned the lessons he was struggling through. Instead, I just nodded. "Thanks for the advice." A month later, everything changed by accident. A local business journal was putting together a story about young real estate investors. While searching public records, they found my name. In December, a reporter named Lauren Mitchell called me. "Is this Tyler Brooks?" "Yes. I'm working on a feature about millennial real estate investors. Public records show you own 4 properties. Would you be interested in an interview?" I almost dropped my phone. Yeah, that's right." My first instinct was to say no, to stay invisible. But then I stopped myself. Maybe I was tired of hiding. Maybe I wanted someone to recognize what I'd built. Or maybe I just needed proof that it was all real. "Sure," I said. We met at a coffee shop. Lauren was professional and took notes the old-fashioned way, with a pen and notepad. She asked about my investing strategy, how I financed the properties, and how I got started. I told her the whole story, how I saved every dollar, how I studied real estate, how much I gave up to make it happen. "Did your family help you get started?" she asked. "No. They didn't even know I was doing it." She looked up from her notes. "They had no idea? I kept it to myself. They didn't think I could do it. So what changed? I got tired of waiting for their approval." She wrote something down. "Self-made investor quietly builds a real estate portfolio. People are going to love that." The article was scheduled for the first week of January. I didn't mention it to my family. It went live on Tuesday, January 8th. That morning, I woke up to an email from Lauren. Your story is live. I clicked the link. There it was. My name, my picture, my story. The headline read, How one 28-year-old built a real estate portfolio in 18 months without family money. The article included everything. 4 properties. A portfolio worth $320,000. Monthly cash flow of $3,400. They even quoted me. Success isn't about having advantages. It's about using what you have and refusing to quit. I took a screenshot and sent it to Logan. Holy crap, he replied. You're famous. Hardly. Your family's going to lose their minds. He wasn't wrong. At exactly 11:23 that morning, my phone rang. Mom. Hi, Mom. Her voice was shaky. Tyler, someone sent me an article about you. The one about real estate. It says you own 4 properties. Is that true? Yeah. There was a long silence. How? And why didn't you tell us? I tried. You laughed. We thought you were only talking about it. I was actually doing it. The whole time you were worried I'd never grow up. Her voice cracked. It says you're worth over $300,000. That's the value of the properties, I said. I still have mortgages. She was quiet again. I need to call your father. Then she hung up. 10 minutes later, the family group chat exploded. Dad. Tyler, call me now. Brandon. Is that article real? Hannah. Wait, you own 4 properties? Mom. Why didn't you tell us? I watched the messages keep coming. None of them knew how to process it. Finally, I replied. It's all true. I built it myself. No family money, no help, just hard work. The chat immediately went quiet. A minute later, Dad sent another message. We need to talk. Sunday dinner. Be there. I stared at the screen for a while. Part of me wanted to stay away. But another part of me, the kid who had spent 28 years trying to prove he was enough, wanted them to finally see the truth. I'll be there. Then I put my phone away and drove over to check on property number 2. No matter what happened with my family, the work still had to be done. And for the first time in my life, that work felt like winning. Sunday came quicker than I wanted. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 4:55 p.m. I wore jeans and a hoodie. I'd stopped trying to impress anyone. My old Civic looked even older parked beside Brandon's Audi. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. Tyler. Hey, Mom. She hugged me so tightly it caught me off guard. When she finally let go, she started crying again. I'm so sorry. So sorry. It's okay, Mom. No, it isn't. We didn't really see you. Dad stepped into the hallway behind her. He looked older than I remembered. Come in, son. The dining table was already set with the good dishes, pot roast again, Mom's favorite comfort meal. Brandon and Megan were there. Hannah and Derek, too. Everyone looked at me as I took my usual seat. Dad cleared his throat. We read the article. He looked at me. 4 properties. $320,000. All in 18 months. Yeah. Brandon leaned forward. How did you even do it? I mean, where did you get the money? I saved $22,000 over 3 years. Then I used financing and kept reinvesting. But, Mom said, we thought you were barely getting by. Living in that tiny apartment. Driving that old Civic. I chose to live that way. So I could invest. Dad slowly put down his fork. I told you it was over your head. You did. I was wrong. The room went silent. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what you were capable of. And I was wrong about what success looks like. He looked down for a moment. You weren't falling behind. You were building something. I just never saw it because I wasn't paying attention. Mom wiped her eyes. Every Sunday I thought you were lost. But you were working. You were planning. You were 10 steps ahead of us. Hannah spoke next. The article called you one of the most successful young investors in the city. That's what it said. And you did all of it without any help. Without the $10,000 Brandon got. Brandon looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology. I accepted that money knowing you got nothing. I convinced myself it was fair because I was more prepared. But honestly, I just didn't want to question it. Thanks, I said. And I meant it. Megan squeezed his hand. We've talked about how differently you two were treated. It wasn't intentional, Mom said quickly. We just thought Brandon needed more help. You always seemed so independent. Independent, I said quietly, was really just another word for ignored. Mom flinched, then she nodded. You're right. And I'm sorry. Dad cleared his throat again. Can we see them? Dad asked. Your properties, everything you've built. I looked around the table, at the people who had overlooked me, doubted me, and never believed I could do it. Then I looked at Mom's tear-filled eyes, Dad's honest regret, and Brandon's sincere apology. They weren't perfect. Neither were we. This wasn't the kind of story where one conversation fixed everything, but it was a start. Yeah, I said. I'll show you. The following Saturday, I took them to each property. We started with the first duplex, the one that changed everything. Angela came outside, hugged me, and told my parents I was the best landlord she'd ever had. Mom cried again. Next was the second duplex. Dennis was outside working in his garden. He waved and told Dad I'd fixed his leaking sink in 20 minutes after the previous owner had ignored it for months. Dad just nodded quietly. Property 3 was the Airbnb. Hannah walked through it smiling. This is beautiful, Tyler. Brandon barely spoke. He simply looked around, taking everything in. We only drove past Property 4 since the tenants were home. Afterward, we stopped at a coffee shop and sat outside with hot drinks. You built all this, Dad said quietly. Without us. Yeah. He looked at me. I don't know what else to say except, I'm proud of you. Really proud. Thanks. Brandon looked over. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you angry with us? I thought about it before answering. I was. For a long time. But not anymore. Why? Because staying angry was only holding me back. I realized I didn't need your approval. I just needed to keep doing the work. Mom reached across the table and held my hand. Can we start over? Can we do better? Maybe. But things have to be different. I'm not coming back as the family disappointment. If I'm coming back, it'll be as an equal. Dad nodded. That's fair. We sat there talking until the sun started to set. For the first time in years, it felt like we were actually listening to each other. There was still pain. Years of it. That wasn't going to disappear overnight. But we had finally begun. 3 months later, I bought property number 5. Another duplex. This one was already in good shape, and the numbers were too good to pass up. For the first time, I shared my journey on social media. Property number 5. No family money, no inheritance. Just years of saving, hard work, and refusing to quit. If you think you can't do it because no one's helping you, you're wrong. You just have to start. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of likes. People thanked me for the motivation. Others asked for advice. Then I noticed one comment from Mom. So proud of you, sweetheart. I always have been, even when I didn't show it the right way. Love you. I liked her comment. A few minutes later, Logan called. 5 properties? You're basically a real estate mogul now. I laughed. I'm just a guy with 5 small rentals who still drives an old Civic with the check engine light on. Yeah, he said. But now that's your choice. He was right. I'd built something real, something no one could take away. Something created through discipline, sacrifice, and refusing to believe the limits other people placed on me. That evening, I drove to my first duplex. I sat on the front porch and watched the sun go down. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. Your mom and I were talking. We'd like to take you out to dinner and celebrate properly. You picked the restaurant. A year earlier, I would have wondered what the catch was. This time, I simply smiled. Sure, Dad. That sounds good. We made plans for Tuesday. After I hung up, I looked at my first property. The paint could use some work. The lawn needed attention. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Just like the life I'd built. Not perfect, not easy, but completely mine. And that was enough. Actually, it was more than enough. It was everything.